Welcome to Cycling Fashion Week, the only global podcast purely focused on cycling style, fashion, culture, and lifestyle. I am your host, Alex, joined by my co-hosts, Warren and Tony. And Cycling Fashion Week is brought to you by Le Club. This fall, Le Club brings you its largest ever cold weather collection, winter apparel and accessories to delight and deliver from brands like MAP, Universal Colors, and Fingers Crossed, or shop super cool indoor training essentials for the time spent Zwifting or on Wahoo System or on Trainer Road. Enjoy with 15% off unique bundles and free shipping on any order over $100. Alternatively, you can also use the code FashionWeek15 and also get 15% off your order over at leclub.cc. If you're in Montreal, check out their coffee shop. They have the best coffee on Rue Saint-Denis and pretty much anywhere in Montreal as well. Warren and Tony, what's up? How you guys doing?
Doing well. Season's coming to a close, although we've had some pretty nice fall weather, which has kept me outdoors longer than I like to be. I mean, I know some of our friends at the many brands we talk about make some great winter gear, and I always say there's no bad weather, just bad gear. But for me, there's bad weather. There's an extent that I just sort of, even with the best kit, would rather just not be outside. But it's been quite nice. And I just want to give a little shout out to the Hamilton area of Southern Ontario, because I've done a couple rides there the last couple of weeks, and the riding there is stellar.
It is. I will second that. I obviously have not ridden there in the last few weeks because I've got a broken wrist, but it is really a really great place to ride. Less cars, more trails, more nice open roads, lots of climbs.
Yeah, a bit more punchy.
Mm-hmm.
I did the Sydenham Road climb for the first time, and it's I would say it dances along the same lines as Camillien. It's got a similar feeling to it. Not quite as steep.
I don't believe that. Look, I've never been there, but I don't believe that at all. It doesn't have the mythical status.
It's true. As far as we know, Eddie Merckx has never gone up it.
David Millar must have gone up it because he waxed poetic about the Hamilton when he was there. I think for was it World Championships that he was there for
his time trial worlds that was unfortunately rescinded. I'm sure. Yeah, sure. They must have made that as part of the road race course. We'd have to look that up. That must be 2003. 2003 was that? Quite a while ago. So
you guys said it's been nice weather so far this fall, but cold weather is coming. And which better brand is there out there for cold weather than Albion? Albion Cycling. They make some great winter gear. They kind of pride themselves on making gear for English weather. And as we said, I'm going to say 2 or 3 episodes ago, I can't remember, we had a giveaway. We had a contest going on with Albion. Basically, what you had to do to win the contest, you had to follow us on Instagram at Cycling Fashion Week and follow Albion at albion.cycling on Instagram. And what you were going to win was one of the unique and therefore elite micro musettes that are made by Albion that they are launching. But it is a Cycling Fashion Week times Albion branded micro musette. And what we asked our listeners was, tell us what you would put in the micro musette. And what we will do today is we will reveal the winner of that contest. Guys, you were more involved than I was in pouring through those the numerous entries that we got, some very creative ones. Who is our winner for the Micro Musette Albion giveaway?
First, want to say before we reveal our winner, I just want to thank everybody who did enter. There were a lot of solid entries, some ones that gave us some good chuckles. I think somebody mentioned healing crystals. For example, there was definitely a lot of mentions of like mid or post ride beer,
and some of them were craft, which obviously these people aren't big enough fans to know that craft's not going to get them. Not going to get them anywhere.
I think someone said they would put their feelings of inadequacy from listening to Cycling Fashion Week too much in the Micro Musette. I thought that was good.
That was a good one. But when it came to the winner, we selected someone that
it was more heartwarming. I think at the outset we said we had no definite parameters on what we were going to choose. Mm-hmm. So we like things that are funny because this is a funny podcast. but it didn't have to be funny. It just had to give us something that felt right. And so the winner was a bit more heartfelt, still a little tinge of comedy, but sort of heartwarming, and also involved France.
I'm going to read the entry and then say the winner's name. So this is the DM we got. Okay, the Micro Musette. I'll start with a story. Mid-July last year, my partner and I took a trip to France to see our families we hadn't seen in 3 years thanks to COVID. During the aforementioned trip, I proposed to my wonderful partner during a 100-kilometer ride through the Burgundy countryside. However, if you've ever tried to hide an engagement ring in an aero jersey, you will understand there is nowhere to hide the outline. This means A, the smooth lines of my jersey are rudely disrupted, and B, my future wife, following my wheel, is staring at said ring box, wondering what it was for 50 kilometers. If I had the Micro Musette, all of this could have been avoided. She said yes, by the way. Also, for a return to France next July for a wedding, I can use it to collect and bring home the king of French energy products, Orangina and Flan. So that was submitted to us by a listener named Paul Braybrook. And so congratulations, Paul. So we will be in touch to sort out getting you your musette that you can use for your wedding. And frankly, we expect you to wear it walking down the aisle.
Congratulations to Paul Braybrook, and thanks to everyone who participated. We got some really good entries, and there are some really funny ones. So our listeners have a sense of humor, and as Warren said, this is partially a satire comedy podcast. People should not forget that. So thank you to everyone who participated. All right. We have a very big episode today. So we get a special guest today. We are welcoming on Shane Cooper, the founder and president of DeFeet Socks. DeFeet Socks have been making cycling socks since 1992. We don't hear of a lot of companies that have been around since 1992, all industries considered. But in cycling specifically, a lot of the companies that we talk about on this podcast have popped up in the last 5-10 years or so. We always say that Rafa was kind of the precursor, and without Rafa, there wouldn't be this podcast. But it's interesting to talk to a company that is even earlier than Rafa in the cycling game. And he is a man who is passionate about socks. He likes to talk about how socks are made. He answered all of our sock questions. Very, very nice gentleman. Shane Cooper from DeFeet Socks. We are going to have him on later today on the podcast. And as well, a quick programming note before we go into our main segments. Just want to let our listeners know that after this podcast today, we're going to take a little break here at Cycling Fashion Week. We launched this podcast, I'm going to say 13, 14 months ago. So it's been a little over a year ago that we put out a podcast literally every second week. We didn't take a break. We went on. So Warren, Tony, and I all have lives outside of this podcast. Maybe you don't think that we do, and that might be accurate, but we actually kind of do have lives outside of this. We all have jobs and families, and that takes time. We need a bit of a break from the podcast. So we're definitely going to skip one episode, and we'll be back probably in about a month from now, or just a little bit over a month, with more content. So don't go anywhere. We'll be around, but we're just going to skip an episode because we need to recharge our batteries here to bring you some more Cycling Fashion Week content.
On to our next segment. As Alex mentioned at the start of the show, we have a very special guest this week. It is Shane Cooper, who is the founder, president, and chief sockologist of DeFeet Socks. If you don't know DeFeet, though I think a lot of our listeners likely already do, they are a cycling sock, over socks, gloves, base layer, arm warmers company that was founded in 1992. Their products are made in the USA in North Carolina. And they also have a pretty storied history in professional cycling, from working with Greg LeMond to sponsoring teams in the World Tour. They've been partnered with now Lotto Destiny is the name. So, you got your Caleb Ewan, and in the women's peloton with the Seneska team. They also have a lot of different designs, which again, we'll get into when we talk to Shane. Personally, I think my first pair of cycling socks were DeFeet. I have a pair of cycling over socks that I have nearly run into the ground, but I'm still using them. I think we're pretty big fans of DeFeet here on Cycling Fashion Week, but welcome to the show, Shane. thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. I'm honored to be here. So thanks for having me.
There was a long time that I thought that only DeFeet made over socks, or at least the kind of more like knitted ones. Like I've seen like other companies come out with them, obviously Pounder Mal. I think now every company sort of like added to their repertoire of it, but early on, riding in Canada, trying to get a couple more, maybe another month out of the weather. When you knew you need oversocks, to me, for some reason, I thought like DeFeet was kind of like had the monopoly on it. So you guys must have been pretty early on in the oversock game.
Yeah, we were early on in the game to actually focus on it and make an actual product out of it. And this year, my business partner and I were in Paul Willerton. We're in Belgium, and we were at dinner, and these young cyclists came in from France, and they thought when they were introduced to the founder and partner of DeFeet, they thought we were a Belgian company because they had seen Tom Boonen wear the shoe cover that we have called the Slipstream for so many years. They just thought DeFeet was a Belgian company. And it was just because of that white Slipstream that Tom Boonen was wearing. So it was kind of funny.
The name kind of suggests you would be a Belgian company. The DeFeet almost sounds like a Flemish name. Did you guys play on that ambiguity to try to give yourself some classics grit?
I was actually, I think, 2 bottles into a good wine when that name kind of slipped out. And it slipped out because of the Tour de France, Tour de Pont, Tour DeFeet, and DeFeet was something that everybody would remember. And it was the opposite of victory in some people's minds. But for me, it was just a tough ass name, that you could always remember. I mean, they say it all the time, every day people are saying defeat. Might be in a negative context, but to win, you must defeat.
Do you remember what the wine was?
Well, it wasn't a Flemish wine. So, no, I don't remember, but it was at a friend's wedding, I guess, in 1992. So
it's been a few years, but do we think it was French, Italian, California wine, maybe an Ontarian wine?
Okay. I'm gonna give a shout out. It was Camus. It was Camus, 1992 Camus from Napa Valley.
Oh, there we go.
It's not true, but it would be really cool if it were true.
Alex, is that good?
My knowledge of Californian wines is actually close to nil, so I don't think I'm very knowledgeable about wine. I know a little bit, but California is not an area that I know very well, so I can't comment on that one.
We actually talk probably more about wine than we should on the show.
Wine is an important accessory to cycling as a pair of socks are.
Beautiful.
The espresso is the sort of mid-ride drink of cyclists, and a nice glass of wine is the weekend post-ride drink of cyclists.
But back to socks. The first question I actually wanted to ask you specifically, because for some reason I've always kind of thought socks are easy to make. There's no basis or real reason to think that. It's just I say that because I feel like socks are not the last thing you think about as a cyclist, certainly not in the winter, but like everybody's so focused on the tech of kits, bibs and jerseys and all that. But like, are cycling socks easy to make, or are they super complicated?
Let me paint a picture. The finest Italian knitting machines. Let's think De Rosa with Campanolo. That's what we have in our room here. And let's get locally supplied yarns that have a sustainable footprint. And then let's add to that a room full of sock scientists and sock connoisseurs. Okay. Our mission is to make your ride more comfortable, starting with your feet, and more stylish. And the fashion of sock doping starts at DeFeet. And I'm going to give you some proof. The Athletic or Not, Handlebar Mustache, Ridge Supply, Seiko 7, 10 Speed, and so many others have one thing in common. DeFeet is who they trust. So is it easy? Yeah, you can make socks. Yeah, it's easy. But if you want to make good socks, it's hard. It's really hard. There's a lot that goes into it.
It's actually true that socks are pretty fundamental, not just in cycling, in life in general. If your socks are wet, there's holes in your socks are not good, chances you're not having a good day in general. And there's nothing worse. It's happened to me a few times on a bike ride, and it actually happened to me at a gravel event, God forbid, several years ago, where it just started pouring halfway through the 113-kilometer ride. And I felt like my feet were in the Atlantic Ocean. It was so wet in my feet that I actually had a horrible day. And because of that, I kept just a terrible view of that ride my entire life. So socks are actually pretty fundamental overall.
Well, you think about a cyclist, the power of the athlete and enters the bicycle through the sock into the pedal. I mean, that's where the power transfer is. So you're right. You don't want that to be sloppy.
So my question to you, Shane, then is what makes a good cycling sock? Because what's the saying? I can't describe it, but I know it when I see it. I feel like socks is like that. I know when I'm wearing socks that are well made, that are good, but I can't actually describe what it is that makes them good and high quality. So can you help us a little bit as a maker of socks? Just kind of tell us about the basics of socks. What is it that makes cycling socks good?
Well, I guess that would be the Sock 101. And, we make our socks inside out. And the reason we make them inside out is because we want durability. And what does that mean, making a sock inside out? When you walk up and go buy a pair of socks, you buy by your feel, and they call that hand. Okay, so you walk up, you feel the outside of a sock, and you feel, oh, it's nice and soft. Well, your foot goes inside the sock. So we like people to buy their socks by foot, not by hand, thinking about having their foot inside the sock. So we put the moisture wicking material on the inside and leaving the abrasion resistant material to the outside. So when we made our socks inside out 30 years ago, we set the standard for durability and performance. But the other part of that is, if you buy a bicycle and they've only got 2 sizes, it's not going to fit very well. So we came out with 4 sizes, and not many sock companies would do that. So 4 sizes fits the foot better. It keeps the heel in the right place. It keeps the top of the cuff in the right place, and everything kind of goes in coordination. And then we have a mesh weave on the top of our sock to allow the vapor to escape. So we use performance yarns, and back in the day it was Coolmax, and today it's recycled water bottles called Reprieve Sorbtech, and it moves the moisture, as you mentioned, Alex. You don't want a wet foot. The mesh of our sock mimics the cycling shoe as well to allow the heat to escape. That's what makes a great cycling sock. You can feel it when you put them on, as you mentioned. You don't want a toe seam, and you want the cuff to be comfortable, and you want just enough compression to not be overly tight.
It's funny, we talk a lot about socks on this podcast in the past year, but I don't think we've ever talked about the technological side, maybe a little bit, but nearly never as in depth as what you've just given us. So,
well, I mean, I feel like he's sort of explaining that the thought process behind, like, socks are underrated as a piece of sort of tech in your quiver of cycling. Like, I was on a ride recently, I think maybe 2 weeks ago. I was riding with a guy, and I looked down and said, "What are your socks?" "Oh, they're just these white ones I got from Walmart." And so he had all the, like, it wasn't like he was cheaping out on the rest of the kit or the bike, but I guess he just sort of like underestimated the sock. Now, strong cyclist, good guy, but we need Shane out here to kind of let these cyclists know that the sock is not to be trifled with. It's as important, or as any other part of your kit, making yourself comfortable, as well as power transfer, and making you a better cyclist.
That actually leads me to a question, Shane. What made you think about socks, and specifically cycling socks, to that detail? Because, like, to Tony's point, a lot of us just never really thought about them that much, let alone enough to start a company.
My heritage, my father emigrated to the U.S. because he was in the sock business. He was a highly sought after sock technician. And back in the 70s, when we came over, he was working on these machines that were making all the socks globally. And so I grew up around socks. And long story short, I became a musician right out of high school and traveled with a band. And I learned marketing in the band, because you have to sell a band. You have to pick the right songs, and you have to manage a band. So I learned some business skills in the band, came out and studied electronics engineering right when the sock machines were starting to transition from analog machines to computer-aided machines. And then on top of that, I was a cycling nut. And so I combined everything that I knew, and that's why I got into making socks. It's one thing that I could improve. When we did it, my wife and I were racing, and she could win and supplement her income in the summer. She could win money, and I was spending money racing bikes. And so
like most people.
Exactly, like most people. And so we started selling socks out of the trunk of the car, and socks that we had made that were changing the industry. And I met Paul Willerton. He was on Greg LeMond's Team Z in a parking lot at the Tour de Pont. And within 2 years, we were in the Tour de France. And I knew right then that we had done something special to get the attention of Greg LeMond and start to change the world of cycling socks. Before DeFeet, socks were throwaway. You would throw them away after one ride. And you can interview all these former cyclists before DeFeet, and you'll find that to be true. So the heritage that my father gifted me, that socks was kind of in our blood, is the reason I chose socks.
And Shane, where was your father from that had all this sock making expertise?
A small town in England, close to Nottingham, and the company was out of Leicester, and the company was named Bentley, and it would be on the same level of Campanolo in componentry. And so those machines from the 50s and 1960s and 1970s, they're the ones that made all the socks all over the world.
Wouldn't tell by your accent that you're an English bloke.
Oh, well, I am a Southern redneck, and first day of school, I figured out I better learn to talk like I am around here. Got rid of that accent real quick.
I'd like to go back just a bit to first getting into the Tour de France and the World Tour with Greg LeMond. So was his team the first one, I guess, to wear DeFeet socks in the pro peloton? And what was that like? Like, how did that come about?
Well, the first team to wear in the pro peloton, not World Cup, was Chevrolet LA Sheriffs. And Paul Willerton was on, as I mentioned, he had been on Team Z with Greg, but he was now on Subaru Montgomery. So we got on with Subaru Montgomery, and then Greg was with Gone, and we got on with Team Gone. What we did is we made each rider their name, their personal sock, and their size. And we made like 10 dozen each, so it was overkill, but it was so fun. Mm-hmm. And I still have a wall art of their socks with their name on. And from there, we went to Mape with Tony Rominger and eventually Johan Museo. And Museo and I became good friends. But Greg was the first guy to wear black, tall socks in the Paris-Roubaix in 1994. And I have those socks at the office, by the way.
What's the right sock height in your mind? There's very fierce debate on that.
There is a fierce, and I think it depends on the person. But, if you're a short guy, you might not want really long ones, and if you're a tall guy, you might not want short ones. But, personally, the UCI is really effing this up. They should really sort this out, because they've got a rule that says it can only come halfway up your leg. And what if you're wearing tights? You might be cheating. But I like a solid 6-inch, because it hits my calf at the right level. Mm-hmm. And for me, the 6 or 7-inch aerator or any of our socks is where I stop it. If it comes up anymore, I'm going like, I can't do that.
We would consider that the right answer on Cycling Fashion Week.
There's always a segment of the population who wears their socks too high or too low. The extremes are no good. You need that, exactly what you're saying, right there where it hits the calf. Now that's different on people's legs, but the ankle sock, we're not fans of the ankle socks, and we're not fans of the compression sock.
But hey, Lance won 7 Tour de France on ankle socks. That's incredible.
Actually, we were the supplier for the nameless one for most of those wins. And if you see a Nike sock with the swish going backwards, those are the ones that we made, because we were going like to Nike because we weren't like fans of anyway. But the nameless one was wearing DeFeet socks.
Well, they were so damn short, we couldn't even see the logo on them.
Yeah. Oh no, he bumped it up. He had a taller one. He was probably the 4-inch guy.
He wasn't like the triathlon guy, those really cut out like ankle socks. But I remember it was maybe like a 2 or 3 inch. But maybe at the end, you're right. Maybe they were a little bit higher at that point.
A couple months ago, I was riding down by the water, and I rode by the start of a triathlon event, and I sort of thought, like, collectively, like on an average, there's the right length of sock here, but it didn't work because either people's socks were way too high or way too low. Like if you were to aggregate all socks at the triathlon event, you would get the correct sock length. But as an individual piece, it's because they're either ankle socks or they're like up to the knee. It was kind of like a weird thing where I was like, if we were to look at this just from sort of a mathematical standpoint, there's a good sock length here, but from an individual perspective, we're way off on sock length in the triathlon world.
It is more aerodynamic. We've seen the wind tunnel results, and a knee sock is definitely more than 8 watts.
Really?
And that's tremendous. Yeah. Our disruptor that we have, Evo disruptor, has been tested not just by DeFeet and NASCAR, but also by Lotto Soudal and Quick Step and all those teams back when we came out with it in 2017. And it was tested at 8 watts faster than a bare leg.
Is that because of the material and the shape, or why is that?
Yeah, it's the way the foot, at the back of the foot, when the airstream comes off, if you can break it up behind the foot. Now, keep in mind, the foot's going through the air at 32 miles an hour, but it's also going in a circle. And so it's going up and down. And so that's really the only thing on the rider that's moving. And so it's crucial. Our disruptors are very affordable for 8 watts. And we are in the wind tunnel again. There have been some claims by a company out of the Netherlands that they have a 12-watt sock, but they tested it on a mannequin with no yaw. And so, you've got to have yaw and you've got to have movement for it to be correct. And so we're back in the wind tunnel. And I set that as a challenge, to everybody in the sock business or clothing business is let's get this thing, let's get 20 watts. I mean, imagine something like that.
I wouldn't have thought the advantage would be that much, to be perfectly honest. So
I guess so. We understand why the UCI is out there measuring socks at that point, because if it can give you an advantage, then that's the definition of marginal gains.
Do you think the riders would wear a knee-high sock? I mean, there is the goofy factor, and there's the tan line, and then there's saving time.
I think some of those guys out there would. I think some of those guys would happily look ridiculous to win. I've seen them do worse.
But what if you look ridiculous and get second? I mean, come on.
On the subject of watts and wind tunnels, and what's it like as a sock company working with World Tour teams? Like, is it just like you send them a bunch of socks, or do you get rider feedback that like helps you lead to these improvements that you're building socks that get like 8-watt advantages, or how does that all work, if you can divulge any of that kind of information?
Sure. When Paul Willerton first saw our sock back in 93, when he saw that it changed the sock world. It made it more durable. So he was a pro rider giving me feedback. And then Greg said, I want some black ones for the Paris-Roubaix. And I said, cool. And then we put the logo sponsors on. And so they're giving us feedback. And so we listened, and initially it was more glory than listening. We were just stoked to be a part of it. But then we started listening, and probably started listening when we started working with Boonen and Cavendish. And Cavendish, he could tell slightest change that we would do to a sock, he would know. He had incredible foot sensations. So we took the feedback from those guys to make it fit better, last longer, or be more aerodynamic, or cooler on Mount Ventoux. And so we brought that feedback to our product development team, and we challenged them. And fortunately, because we have these incredible athletes that I call our astronauts, that's dating me, of course, because you guys don't have astronauts, you have drones. Back in my day, we'd had astronauts that everybody looked up to. And so these are our astronauts. So the yarn companies we work with want to reach and touch those athletes. And, we've worked with all types of fibers. And one of the things that we've worked with is spider silk. We're constantly trying to push the edge, to nanotube technology. And you guys think it's just socks, but to us, it's a science. It's there's a lot to it, man.
To that point, a lot of people think it's just socks, and I mean, it's nice that you've got a different view of it. But a lot of people do sort of take socks as a just purely the sort of aesthetic form. How does it fit with their kit? How does it fit with their shoes? So, design is going to be a very important part of a sock brand, of making socks. No matter how well they work and how well you can sell that, a lot of cyclists are going to want to make sure they look right. you have a pretty extensive range of designs, from simple minimalist colors to some of the wild patterns. Where's the design inspiration come from? How's the sort of that portion of the design process, not the tech so much, but the sort of aesthetic side of it? How does that work over at DeFeet?
Well, it used to suck. It was we got left behind. Let's put it that way, because we focused so much on the technical side, and we got left behind with the companies that I mentioned prior. The Atlantic and Ornat and Handlebar and all those guys, Rich Supply. They left us in the dust. All of a sudden, I'm seeing their product in the centerfolds of the magazines, and DeFeet was not there. We were making goofy socks with silly sayings on them, and we just couldn't get out of the way, our own way. We got a great design team, but about that time, I hired a guy named Rob Dickerson. I'll say it this way. Rob is the design eye for the cycling guy for us. And he brought great ideas. And then we would take our product development team and make sure that they worked. And one of Rob's and DeFeet's incredible designs was the ombre that he created, which has 5 different colors. We would have never nailed that without having Rob's inspiration into that. But then we have a great team. It's all about the team. Sometimes designers go over the top and it won't work in a sock, and it looks bad and it won't fit. So we try and make sure that all those things come together technically, but they can look good. So it's definitely a group effort.
Shane, tell us about one thing that seems core to your company is that you make your socks in the United States, in North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. That seems pretty rare. I mean, in terms of making not only apparel, but socks more specifically, it seems like that would have been sent over to China or anywhere else in Asia a long time ago. So tell us about the process of making socks in the United States. What does it mean to you? What benefit do you get by doing that you wouldn't have if you were to make them in Asia, for example?
You guys are in Canada. In 1992, we had just signed an agreement, NAFTA, and NAFTA it ended up not working for many people. And the many people in the US lost their jobs to China because China dropped the price of what they paid their labor. So there was a huge exodus of manufacturing over to China. And when we started DeFeet, all the MBAs laughed at us. They didn't think we'd make it. But what I saw was an opportunity to give people jobs that had lost their jobs and get the best technicians in the world. But better than that, to have our own product development right there. And so we can change things. And so we're all cyclists and runners and skiers. So we go out and we test our products and we come back to North Carolina in our own factory. We own our own shit, and we go in there. And if we need to change something, we change it. We call the yarn company that's 80 miles away and we get things sorted or fixed or changed or perfected. So that's part of the reason that I wanted us to stay in the USA and in North Carolina. But then there's the other reasons. When we ride our bikes or travel to a bike race, we see the farms and the communities that are there with the farms in the US and in Canada, I'm sure. And then the manufacturing, the backbone of America. So, they say the immigrants sometimes are just as proud as being born. And I guess that hit me on that side as well. And it's not a USA thumping thing. It's we make great product. And it's because we have the finest craftsmanship in the world here. And we can, like I said, the product development, having it here. So that's kind of why we did it.
I feel like there's a movement to bring production back from overseas more and more in several industries, but more specifically in things that you would consider to be craftsmanship, where you need the know-how, you need kind of fine details. Overall, people would want to have it. You hear a lot more about nearshoring, onshoring, friendshoring, etc. So it's interesting. You guys were maybe precursors in that trend, and certainly you were going against the grain in the 1990s, because I live in Montreal, which is a city that had a very large textile industry. And over time, as cheaper labor in other countries appeared, the entire industry kind of disappeared. Other stuff popped up though, so it did change. But you're right that in the 1990s, that was certainly a contrarian point of view to take.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad we did it. And our local footprint that affects other jobs, the yarn and supply chain, and North Carolina State University have a textile program. I actually can wear an all made in the USA, mostly made in North Carolina wardrobe. Today, I'm wearing a Kitspo shirt. There's a TS Design cotton shirt. I've got some Wranglers and some Levi's that are made from cotton fields in North Carolina. I get off on that. I think it's great.
Can I ask you a question about what you're wearing? Are you wearing on your wrist? Is that a Seiko turtle that you're wearing right now?
Oh, wow. You caught that? Look at that. Yeah. And this is not my collector one. This is a newer model, but yes, this is a Pro Spec rehashed turtle, but I've got a 92 in my closet.
Incredible watch, and actually a great cycling watch too, because it's very legible. If you're riding your bike, you just want to check the time, just put it on your wrist and you can instantly tell what time it is. It's not one of those complicated watches to tell the time. We've talked a lot on this podcast about watches while cycling, and you could argue it's a bit obsolete with bike computers and everything, but we think it's a big stylish thing to do, and the Seiko turtle is one that I particularly like.
I think all three of us wear our Seikos as our on bike watch. I have a not quite
Seiko SKX for me.
Yeah, well, you have the XKS, but we wore either Sport 5, the sort of newer stuff we got in a little later when those are harder to get. But the turtle's a beautiful watch, and there's some elegance to just wearing a watch for. It's not even practical really because you got the bike computer, but it's just a nice accessory. And I think the Seiko it's a durable, affordable, and easy to read watch for the bike.
Well, I've got a 7002 from 1992, and I was riding one day, and I hit a bump on the road, and I landed on my crotch on the top tube, and I didn't realize it hurt so bad on the boys down there that the watch had fallen off on this gravel road, and so I went back 3 times looking for that watch on a 19-mile gravel road with no cell coverage or anything. I actually found the watch on the 3rd ride. And it was laying in the road right before the leaves were going to fall. So, whew.
We went from feet to wrists here, a bit of a tangent, but I had to ask you.
This is called Cycling Fashion Week, but it's just Tony, Alex, and Warren's favorite things. We just happen to know a lot about cycling, and we throw in wine and watches and.
Well, watches are great, right?
Speaking of time, how's this for a segue? We're coming up on your 30th anniversary of DeFeet, right? Or is it past already? Because
No, November the 18th. Yeah.
Oh, so it'll be about less than 2 weeks after this episode comes out. Is it going to be your 30-year anniversary? So that's obviously a huge milestone, especially for a sock company. So, you've mentioned some of the things you've done, like having to change your design style. Like, why do you think DeFeet has lasted so long? And I ask that is like, I feel like DeFeet was one of my first 2 pairs of cycling socks for sure. But also when first time I went to a store to buy cycling socks, I think I had the option between DeFeet and like Castelli, and that was it. So I don't know if it's ubiquity or what, but I'm just curious, why do you think you've endured for so long?
Well, and I'm not exaggerating when I give you this list of events. We had a fire. We burned to the ground. We had a flood. We had a tornado. We had a $250,000 theft. We survived 2008, 2020, and now we're surviving COVID whiplash. And you ask why, and I guess it's because we're cyclists first. And we love competition, but we love adventure. And being in business is being an adventure, and it's not easy. It's not easy to make a sock. I've already proved that. And it's not easy to stay relevant, especially when the fashion police and sock doping happen. We've survived because we don't give up. Our fire devastated us. We couldn't make socks for 9 months. Our entire plant burned down. We had to buy all new machinery. Yeah, I mean, we just kept going. My wife and I are the primary owners in DeFeet, but we also found some angel investment along the way from Greg LeMond and some of his friends that just wanted to see an American company not die on the vine. And it comes down to a small team. I mean, people think DeFeet's this huge corporation. We're a 50,000 square foot facility with about 35 employees. That's it. and we sell to 37 countries around the world. And we just won't give up. It might be that I'm ignorant and maybe I should give up at some point, but it's like, no, I'm riding, man. I'm loving it.
So what's next for DeFeet? If you see that the designs have maybe sort of changed and the fashion police has come out. Obviously,
That's us.
You're a tech company and you're gonna certainly want to keep that going. But what's next? What are you thinking? Is there new designs coming, both aesthetically and functionally? What's DeFeet got up its sleeve?
Well, up our pant leg, we have quite a bit. And it's funny because during COVID, we suffered like everybody suffered, but we stopped our product development because we didn't know what to do. So my initiative over the last 3 months is to get our product development team back in order, being aggressive. We're looking, and I don't mind if our competition knows, we're looking at carbon nanotubes. We're looking at all kinds of stuff, but we did purchase direct to garment printers. And so these printers we print on white socks, and Lotto Destiny socks will be made on this machine. So this machine will be able to print better graphics, and you'll see those on our website. If you go to our 360 sock collection, you can print one pair of socks for $30 with it, whatever you want on it. So that's innovation. Innovation will come from yarn. It will come from the sublimation direct to garment printing, and it will come from silhouettes. And probably the biggest announcement that we have, and you guys are probably going to be the first ones to be able to push this out, is DeFeet in 2023 will be able to use the logo RWS, which means responsible wool sourced. And that is a very hard achievement to get. And we're the first company in the world to have a transparency all the way back to the sheep farm in Shaniko, Oregon. So basically we took the footprint, and this is innovation, please understand that, but we took the footprint of where the sheep are farmed, and we brought the superwash to South Carolina. We brought the dyeing to North Carolina and the twisting to South Carolina. And that was a global footprint that included China in the past. So we've localized that and created a smaller footprint, but also with responsibly grown wool. And MEC in Canada and REI in the US, they're all about that initiative of responsible wool collected. That is going to be a huge innovation and up our pant leg secret that is out now, I guess. And we hope to have our entire line covered with this wool source by the end of next year.
Wow, very impressive. And we know for sure from a lot of comments from listeners that where the cycling kit's coming from is not, we've been told we don't ask enough questions about it and talk about it enough. And that's important to a lot of the listeners and a lot of cyclists out there. Who's making it, how is it made, where's the material coming from, what are the working conditions for the factory. We've got a lot of comments about that, so kudos to you on being able to do all that stuff. Lastly, before we get to the rapid fire questions, most important question I think of the whole podcast is, can you make some custom Cycling Fashion Week socks?
Well, my first question is, do you have an audience? Because I can make you guys some really good socks for the three of you. I mean, it would be so easy, as your first question was. Yeah, we could make you some sublimated 360 socks with your faces on them. But I would rather that would be great, and it'd be egotistical for you guys, but I would rather make a really cool sock that we can only sell through your show. We should do that. We should really do that. You guys are the fashionistas. Let's make it, man.
Oh man. But then we're putting our taste and our design aesthetics on the line.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to see my face on a sock, to be honest with you. I think I'm going to sit this one out.
Well, let's do this, Alex. Why don't the three of you guys design a sock, and then we'll have a contest. No faces, just whatever you guys think is fashion, and let's try it. Let's see who wins. And then whoever wins, we will bring that sock into the line, and we will donate the profit to any charity that you pick.
Whoa. This is the highest stake thing to ever happen on Cycling Fashion.
Yeah, for sure.
Actually makes me a little nervous here.
Yeah, seriously.
And the winner will get a brand new Seiko watch.
I feel like our listeners would be into that because we've hyped that so much on the podcast.
It's funny. I think we were using that question as a way to plug the fact that you make custom socks, but now it's just taken on this whole other dimension.
I got to stop and plug because Paul Willerton is going to kill me. I didn't mention custom. That's what made DeFeet who we are. It's 50% of our business, if not more. And the beautiful thing about custom socks for you is they're just for you. A beautiful thing for us, it doesn't sit in our warehouse. It's not inventory. Boom.
There you go. We'll move on to the rapid fire sections, which, as our listeners know, rapid fire questions are just like quick questions meant to be a quick answer. Okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Road, gravel, or mountain biking?
Wrong order. It is gravel, mountain bike, road.
Shane, question for you. You're in North Carolina. You're on the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains near the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is a favorite destination for many cyclists. What's the best, like, if you're going to go ride in North Carolina, is it for the road riding? Is it for the gravel? What's the best thing to do in North Carolina cycling wise?
I would say that mountain biking is what most people would say, but I would say the gravel here is incredible. It's all these old fire roads, and it's a really hard choice. But road would be my last option, but that's because it's getting busier, and it depends on where you are. If you're on the Blue Ridge Parkway, I mean, that's a road. I mean, that's beautiful. So I would go with the gravel because it's spectacular.
None of us are mountain bikers, but I mean, we don't want to admit that we ride gravel, but we do sometimes. White or black socks when you're riding?
Well, depending on my shoe color, you guys have taught me well. And I would have to say I probably go black more often than white. But I do like a black shoe with white sock. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I
no.
Yes, I do.
Oh, no.
A white sock with a black shoe can sometimes set it off.
We recently, I think we talked about this on the podcast a few weeks ago, but we recently discovered that is like a style in Denmark. That is like the go-to style. Whereas for
Right.
us, certainly in our parts of Canada, but I think in North America, we kind of view that as a faux pas. But in Denmark, it's the look.
I think Alex has pointed out it can make you look a bit like a tap dancer if you're wearing the black shoes and the white socks. Some may not like that. Although I have noticed, and I think, Warren, I've actually noticed even in Toronto, not in the cycling world, but aside, I've noticed the low Doc Martin with a white sock has come back as a very popular look. So I think black shoes and white socks are sort of, it's gonna infiltrate its way into the North American cycling scene for sure.
I do like colorful socks too, like go crazy pink or whatever. Obviously it depends on the shoe that you're wearing, but I think there's room for that as well. I'm not a white shoe, white sock extremist. I do think there is room for other styles out there.
Just a few more. We already asked you I had one that was what sock length you wear, but you've told us 6 inch.
The 6-7 inch. That's what.
Yeah, you can't take that
nails
back.
it.
That's your answer. You've got like a 5-year guarantee on your socks. So we wanted to know what's the longest a pair of DeFeet socks have lasted, whether it's yours or you've heard about from a customer or pro rider.
I think that some of your countrymen would attest to this, and mainly Brian Walton and Alex Steeda. I don't know if you remember those guys, but they were famous bike racers, Olympians from Canada. But we had a team that would travel with all the bike races all over the world. It was called Lobby Chair. And Lobby Chair was who would stay up into the lobby the latest at night in the chair drinking. And so this became a worldwide club, and we made socks. And recently I got a pair of 1994 Lobby Chair socks sent back to me that had never been worn. And I have those. So that is the oldest DeFeet socks that I have that have never been worn. Mm-hmm. But now as far as wearing them, we get people all the time come up to us and pull their pant leg up and say, "Hey, look at these." And they'll be, tiny, short, 2 inches and, all worn out. And we say, we'll replace those if you send them back to us. "Oh, I love these. I love them." DeFeet socks may go out of style before they wear out.
I mean, I have a pair of over socks, over shoes, but I forget what call them. The, I don't know how long I've had them. I think since I started, close to when I started cycling, or certainly when I started in the winter. Yeah. Yeah, 7 or 8 years probably. And they're still as vibrant as when I got them. That's why I like them, is they're quite, for the winter, they're pretty noticeable.
Well, there's scientific research says that the neon going around in a circle is the first thing that their driver will see.
Shane, I got one last rapid fire for you. What's the best barbecue pit in the Asheville area?
Well, I'd have to say JD's, and it's probably about 1 hour from Asheville.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's worth the drive. The Asheville peeps are going to get pissed off at me, but it's the real McCoy. It's none of that foo-foo barbecue shit. It's the real McCoy. So come on down to JD's, y'all.
I sure will, because I love barbecue. It's great mid-ride snack if you like falling asleep on the second half of your ride.
I feel like collard greens, though, could really give you a boost, man. There's got to be a lot of phosphates or something in there, right?
I feel like it'd be hard to digest, to be honest with you.
Just have a pickle to finish and you'll be fine. It works on the cramps. So pickle.
The very last thing that we also like to give our guests the opportunity to throw something into the canal. That is, take something you don't like about the cycling world, cycling industry, cycling in general, put it in the canal. Or if you want to talk about something positive, you can do a Camillien. So is there either or both you would like to do, Shane?
I would like to throw Rafa's pocket location into the canal. Their jersey pockets are too high. I can't reach them.
Yes.
Am I the only one?
No, I 100% agree.
100%. And I don't like to stop when I'm riding. I want to eat while I'm riding.
Yeah.
I've shattered my elbow, so I have very limited mobility in my left elbow. So I can't reach into the pocket because it's too high up.
And it's tiny. Sorry, Rafa, but
you've nailed it. That's like one of the best canals I've heard.
Yeah.
But it's true. And Rafa, if you're listening, the good news is you get to go up the climb with your style. Their style has been incredible for 14 years. They came from nowhere. We laughed at them until we started wearing it. And that is where the style for cycling, in my opinion, the modern day cycling style started there. And so I let them go up. What is your famous climb that you're talking about, or your hill?
Camillien.
There we go.
We've said many times on this podcast, without Rafa, the show wouldn't exist. So yeah.
Shane, the pocket thing is so spot on. I'm going to be thinking about that all night.
But they're a pretty innovative and responsive company. I'm sure they'll listen and try to improve their pocket location.
Warren, you probably broke your hand trying to reach into that pocket.
That's how I crashed. Yeah, I was reaching for my pocket and it got stuck in there. And then, yeah. Well, Shane Cooper, this has been a really insightful interview about sock technology, but also the history of DeFeet. You have quite a storied history in cycling, both in pro cycling, but also just the technological side of socks. So we appreciate you coming on and telling us about DeFeet, your various sock technologies and styling, and just hearing your company story, because I think it's great that you make it, I say locally in quotes because we're in Canada, but it's great to know that you're making it so responsibly and sustainably. And it's been really great having you on Cycling Fashion Week.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. And guys like you keep our sport, shall I say, fashionable. I mean, kudos. I mean, old goobers like me need help, and having your expert advice of what to wear. I'm going to get rid of the white socks and the black shoe thing now. I'm embarrassed. I'll make sure that I get my game on. And thanks for keeping cycling hip and stylish.
And that's great, Shane. I appreciate that. And just for our listeners, they can find you on Instagram at DeFeet and on the internet at DeFeet.com. Okay, our next segment. So thank you to Shane Cooper from DeFeet Socks. Great interview. We're going to move on to our next segment here, even though he did do a canal, which was a very good one on the interview. We're going to do our flagship segment, Into the Canal, where we throw something we don't like from the world of cycling or cycling fashion into Montreal's beautiful Lachine Canal. Alternatively, some of us might have a Camillien, which is something that we want to commend from the world of cycling. I'll let you guys start. Warren, what do you got this week?
I'm going to go positive this week. I feel like we all need some positivity in our lives sometimes. I'm going to give a Camillien to the friends I've made through cycling. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not me giving Camillien to community. I think cycling, you meet some very interesting, unique personalities through cycling, maybe prickly sometimes. I'm just going to give a Camillien to the friends I've made through cycling, but the very select group of friends not the broader community. I'm just trying to recognize that cycling can lead you to meet some pretty interesting people. And I would even, the podcast is a whole different thing, but somebody like Shane Cooper, who, we just interviewed because of this podcast, but in a way met him because of cycling. Interesting character. So that's what I'm giving a Camillien to.
I thought you were talking about like the group of friends we have in Toronto that we ride with. Okay,
Also
because I'm just going to make it clear to them, because I know some of them listen to this, because it's the same people I met along the way of cycling, that I'm not giving you a Camillien, and a lot of you annoy me. And I'm not going to say which ones, but Warren can say he's happy to meet you guys, whereas I'm not that happy to have met you.
I'm going to go positive as well this week, guys. I'm going to give a Camillien to the short interlude between the end of outdoors riding season in the Northern Hemisphere and the beginning of indoor trainer season. And I think that is the period from the mid to late November to the Christmas holiday, basically. So essentially, yeah, late. So from about the time of US Thanksgiving to about Christmas, I feel like that's the period of the year when, here at least, the weather's too bad to ride outside, but you don't quite want to start hammering it on the trainer just yet because it's too early to really start training for the next season. So you're officially in rest mode, which means that if, unlike me, you don't have kids, you can sleep in on a Saturday morning, can just relax, can, not go out on your bike without any guilt, without necessarily doing periodized interval training on your Zwift machine or on your Wahoo system. So that's a really nice kind of guilt-free season. You can just kind of chill, not really worry about cycling that much. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes we all need a bit of a break from cycling. I said at the beginning of the podcast, quick programming note, we're going to take a little, break from this podcast for a couple of weeks here to recharge our batteries. I think we all probably need that at the end of the cycling season. So I'm going to give a Camillien to that short interlude between about US Thanksgiving and Christmas.
I usually try and take around that time to maybe early January to be off. And I recommend all those cyclists out there who are still obviously itching to be active, take that time off and maybe just do sort of a cross training sport. And I'm not talking about running. Yeah, rock climbing. I think about maybe boxing this year. A couple months of sort of some boxing classes. I know, I talked to a lot of friends. They want to kind of start doing some more yoga. We're getting on in years. So get that flexibility going, make sure we can have the stem slammed. I wonder if we can work with some sort of yoga teacher to do stem slam specific yoga to like work the right areas of your sort of hip hinge and back so that all cyclists can accept the slam stem.
I'm thinking of taking up Krav Maga as not necessarily as cross training, but just for the hell of it. Why not?
I haven't done that. I've done other sort of combat sports as a for the hell of it or for some cross training. They're quite fun, quite intense, and a lot different than cycling.
Then we can start a spinoff, Krav Maga Fashion Week.
I think it'd be a pretty
black
short
pants. I think it's just black pants with white t-shirts. I think that's all.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Tony, what do you got this week, Canal or Camillien?
So this week I'm going to throw Google into the Canal. I refuse to pay for Strava Premium, which, I mean, this is probably proving why I should pay for it, but I still refuse to. In order to get route files as GPX for my computer, you need Strava Premium. I don't want to pay for that. So for a long time, I was using this app called Strata X, which is a free app that would essentially allow you to extract courses and rides from Strava, and for free be able to create the GPX file, which you can put on either Wahoo Element or your Garmin, your Hammerhead, your, I don't know, Lazine, whatever you got. And recently it hasn't been letting me sign into Strata X, and I sign into Strava through my Google account. And so it keeps telling me my password's wrong when I try and use it to sign into the Strata X app. But I know it's not, because I have Password Manager and I'm double checking it, and I'm signed into other things with Google, the same thing. And then sort of researching it, I looked up, I don't know if this is 100% true because it's on the internet, which usually means it's true, but it might not be. But apparently Google will sometimes, if an app is suspect, which I'm sure this Strata X is, because it's some sort of very basic, probably not, verified app, it will just block you from being able to sign in. And so as far as I understand, I can't use this great free Strata X app because of Google's making me not sign in, which means it won't connect to my Strava because that's how my Strava is connected. And long way around, basically on a ride on the weekend, I got separated from the group, didn't have the ride, couldn't get a GPX, and had to basically just ride until I got lost, felt lost, pulled up my phone, kept riding, added a few more Ks to the route than it would have been. So Google's in the canal.
Okay, all right. This week we're going to do a re-rate your bike for free. Haven't done it in a little while, and I got to say the queue is getting longer and longer. Lots of bikes to rate out there, so we better get started. And this week we are rating what I think is going to be a one-of-a-kind bike, always a favorite of this podcast. We like bikes that are unique, that aren't cookie cutter, and this seems to fit the bill. So this comes to us from a guy named Dan. From reading his message, it seems like he is from the United Kingdom, and he sends us a couple of pictures and he says, rate my bike. This is the Stealth Carbon. That's the brand actually. It's not just Stealth Carbon. The brand is called Stealth Carbon. You can find them on Instagram at stealth.carbon. So he says, this is the Stealth Carbon aero frame. Matt, the guy who runs Stealth, took my bike fit data to put a cockpit and frame size together that when I first rode it, it fit like a glove. It's got a custom paint job taking inspiration from the gold flecked Trek Project One Madone. This is, again, the Stealth Carbon. He says it's a very small British company. And just to give you a sense of how small it is, I think they have 480 followers on Instagram, although that's not always an indicator of how big or small something is, but maybe a bit of a proxy there. And he says that Matt, the founder of the company, the owner of the company, lives just down the road from Dan, the guy who sent us the bike. So that is from Dan. How about I start describing this a little bit? We will obviously post pictures on our account at Cycling Fashion Week. So essentially, Stealth Carbon, what is that? So this is an aero frame. So I guess if I were to compare the geometry of this bike, I don't know, maybe it would look like a giant propel or something that's kind of aggressively aero. The seat post is aero, just cuts through the air. Every tube on this bike is very, pretty deep, but pretty thin. So it cuts through the air. It is a glossy black color, but again, it's got a gold flecked paint job on it. So a bit of a splatter thing going on this bike. From afar, it looks a little bit like a galaxy of stars, except that in this case, they are gold, not silver. But I really like the shiny, glossy black with the gold bits all over the frame. And what's nice is that he seems to have something like relatively deep section, maybe 50, 55 millimeter carbon rims, but he's got tan sidewalls. And when you look at it from afar, the tan sidewalls seem to pick up the gold in the frame as well, creating an interesting color contrast between the black and the /tan/gold. He has a pretty slammed stem, I would say. This thing is slammed. However, it is one of those new stem models that have a bit of a stack no matter how low they are. We've talked about that many times before. His bar tape is also black with some gold stars on there. And last but not least, maybe the cherry on the cake, or the icing on the cake, as you say in English. In French, we say the what do we say in French? Yeah, we say the cherry on the cake. In English, you say the icing on the cake. What am I talking about?
Cherry on top, icing on the cake.
Okay, whatever. I haven't made a cake in a
Same
in a
thing.
little while.
I'm just saying.
Last time I made a cake for my daughter's birthday, it collapsed at the party. So we'll
So
blame
the cherry
it on that.
was on the bottom.
It actually had strawberries, and they were all over the plate, not on the cake. So he's got a gold chain on there, which is kind of blingy, but I kind of like it. I mean, he's got a bit of a Pittsburgh Steelers thing going on there with the black and gold, and he went all the way with the gold chain. He seems to have a Shimano 105 crank on this thing, which not the most aesthetic crank out there. I think we'll get to it at some point, but we have a rant about cranks, and I know Tony's been sitting on this one for a while. We will get to that at some point. Not the nicest crank, but matches the black of the frame. And guys, I think that's about all I got on this bike description. So I'll leave it to you. What do you guys think?
I wanted to start by saying I don't actually know what this bike cost. And as much as we talk about how spending money is great, which it is, I feel like I just wanted to give Dan some respect for what I would imagine is likely sort of like a blue collar or like a working person's custom kind of bike. And the reason I say that is, he's working with this local fitter and designer to create the bike. He's got 105. He's got 105 group set on it. He's got what look to be unbranded carbon wheels. I don't know for sure. I can't really tell, but that's what it looks like. Because as an aside, if you're paying full price for NV wheels, like just buy light bike carbon wheels. Like, but anyway, so I just wanted to give Dan some props or respect for that, because I feel like he's created a unique looking bike on probably for far lower cost than a lot of off the shelf bikes out there. Anyway, aesthetically, one thing I wanted to call out, he did say the custom paint job is inspired by the gold flecked Trek Project 1 Madone. What it actually reminds me of is there's a small frame manufacturer out of New York, I think specifically Brooklyn, called Weiss Manufacturing. And they've kind of like been doing this sort of splatter paint job for a number of years now. They also have these kind of wacky seat stays, if you're familiar with the brand. Anyway, that's immediately what I actually, when I first saw the photo before I read the description, that's what I thought it was. I thought it was a Weiss, and I was excited because they make steel and aluminum bikes. I think they ventured into carbon, unfortunately. I do like the paint job. That's a long way of saying I like the paint job. And I like how he's matched the gold chain to it. I'm usually not a fan of gold chains, but I feel like the fact that he went out of his way to match it to the paint on the bike is pretty great. If he could find a gold front derailleur, that'd be amazing. I appreciate his attention to detail here and how he's brought together the gold chain, the yellow in the paint, and the tan sidewalls. I can't even tell if the stem is slammed because it's an integrated headset. I have less of an issue with 105, the look of it, than you guys did. It's not great, but it's whatever. It's serviceable.
No. See, this crank is proving my point on the rant I want to go on that I haven't had the opportunity. And I'm not going to do the whole thing right now, but basically, this is a 105 crank. And my whole point is that it used to be that there was kind of a distinct aesthetic hierarchy as you moved up Shimano's ranks. This looks exactly like an Ultegra crank. And to be honest, it looks also like a Dura-Ace crank. If someone had just printed Ultegra on it, we wouldn't have said, "Oh, that doesn't look right" or whatever. It all looks the same. They've sort of stunted it. That's kind of my rant on it. So I have no problem with this. I don't think it looks any worse or better than an Ultegra or a Dura-Ace crank of the same generation. That's kind of my point. Whereas they used to look always much different, and you could really tell the higher quality. I think you guys have sort of hit the nail on the head with a lot of it. I'm going to give this an 11 out of 10 solely because it has convinced me that I think I need some new tires for next season, and I'm going to get some GP5000s because the tone of this tan sidewall is the best. Like right now I have some challenge tires, the Roubaix on, and it's just like a bit more too brown, the sidewall. Like this is a real kind of like yellowish tan, like reminds me a lot more of that very old school. And I think I have a friend who has this, but for some reason, just the way this guy's put it together in this photo with the gold chain and the gold flex and stuff, it's 100% convinced me that some fresh tires, fresh tires for next spring will be these GP5000. So because of that, it's 11 out of 10.
I forgot to rate it. I give it an 8.9, and the only reason it's not higher is because it's an aero carbon bike. I know I'm a carbon guy now. We know that, but I still don't really like aero frames.
Yeah, I'm going to give it also 8.5 out of 10. I think he's done everything right on the color matching. The gold flecked is incredible. He went glossy black and not matte black, which listeners know that's a big deal for me. So I think he did everything right on the color. The only reason why I'm knocking it down from 10 to 8.5 is because I personally am not a huge fan of aero bikes. I just don't think they look that good. But overall, in the genre of aero bikes, he did a very, very nice job. And so I give it high marks. Now, I do want to come back on Tony's crank point, and we agreed he's not going to do the full rant today. So this is just a teaser for the crank rant, which is going to come at a later time. But I do want to say I agree with Tony. It's kind of a boring looking crank, the 105, and it looks exactly the same as the Ultegra. And one of my deepest regrets in my bicycle buying life has been that when I built out my Marinoni with Marinoni themselves, I got them to put Shimano Ultegra Di2 on it, and I came out with that ugly Ultegra crank. Should have gone for something more stylish. But what I do want to say, I would argue that the best looking crank of all time is the Cannondale proprietary crank that we used to find on the Super 6 Evo, something like, I'm going to say 5 years ago, 6 years ago. That crank that looked a little bit like a sun, like if a child were to draw.
I think it's called the Spider Tech. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's something like that.
Best looking crank of all time, I think. If anyone at Cannondale is listening, please bring it back, because I'm sure anyone with a sense of aesthetics was in love with that crank. As far as current cranks in the market today, this is going to be really funny, but I think SRAM makes a nicer looking crank than what's been coming out of Shimano at the moment. And now I wouldn't be caught dead with it. Mostly, not that I wouldn't want to be caught dead with it, but mostly I'd be worried that it would fail on me mid-ride. But as far as looking at it on a picture, it is much more pleasing to the eye than what Shimano's been putting out. I'm talking about the SRAM Red cranks more specifically. I think they have more interesting aesthetics than what we've seen out of Shimano. So I like Shimano. I'm a Shimano fan, but they need to pick it up on the aesthetics of their cranks.
I also want to say, just as a group set as a whole, is I really need the silver option to come back. Probably up until, I forget what series it was, but pretty recently, up until a few years ago, you used to be able to get almost everything in both black or silver. And now, especially Shimano, but all of them just essentially, and I know Shimano released some like one-off GRX silver, but like I'm talking about every option, because honestly, I think like we talk about the love of our steel bikes and the round tubes and stuff, and I think it would look better with the silver crank, to be honest, than the black that I've got on there, but I got no option.
I'm very proud to say that on my Trek 5200 US Postal colorway, which is kind of black, gray, silver, and blue, I got an old silver 5236 Shimano Ultegra crank on there, and it looks pretty good.
Although I guess they're producing so few cranks right now, or group sets, because of what's happened with the pandemic and the supply chain and everything like that, it does. You shouldn't ask them to make silver now, because they can't even get the black ones out.
All right, so high marks for Dan from the UK on his Stealth carbon frame, black and gold flecked. Thank you, Dan. Keep sending us bikes, although we're going to try to work through the pile in the next several episodes. Cycling Fashion Week, at Cycling Fashion Week on Instagram, or cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com. Okay, that's it for another episode of Cycling Fashion Week. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Warren. And thank you, Shane Cooper from DeFeet Socks. Very nice interview with Shane Cooper. Very nice guy. Was glad to have him on. He was a super guy to have on the podcast. Taught us everything there is to know about socks. Thank you to our partner, Le Club. This fall, Le Club brings you its largest ever cold weather collection, winter apparel and accessories to delight and deliver from brands like MAP, Universal Colors, or Fingers Crossed, or you can also shop super light indoor training essentials for the time spent on your smart trainer with the fan at full speed. You can enjoy 15% off unique bundles and free shipping on any order over $100, or if you prefer, use the code FashionWeek15 and also get 15% off, alternatively, your order with that code. Check them out if you're in Montreal. Le Club Espresso Bar on Rue Saint-Denis, best coffee in the city. As I mentioned earlier today, we will take a little break. We will definitely skip a few weeks to recharge our batteries, but we will be back in a few weeks with more Cycling Fashion Week content. That's it for us this week. Talk to you later.
Can't have hot takes without batteries.